I got up from the carpet and tried to attack again. This only resulted in a slight push to the stomach. I noticed his movement and knew how to react, but when the right decision came to mind, it was too late. Instinct, Dan, act, don't think, Tim shouted as I stood up again. I threw a weak left punch, followed by a right, and I was back on the floor. Several weeks of training went on like this, and something began to become clearer, although not everything. Tim, my contact karate instructor, was short and skinny, but he had incredible agility and strength. At the beginning of our training, he easily defeated me, but it was more about technique than strength. Now his training has become more intense, and I began to feel real results, albeit with difficulty, and I liked it. Tim was about 25 years old. His arms were thin but strong, and he weighed almost half my weight, about 210 pounds. But even with that little weight, he was able to put me in my place every night for the last few weeks. How did I end up in this situation? My wife, Patty, was not home that evening when I returned from work. Her car was gone, so was her furniture, or at least everything she was able to carry in the trailer she rented. All things that had any value disappeared. Bank accounts were also emptied. I have to say I was surprised, but I really wasn't. What else can you expect from the marriage of a 30-year-old man with a much younger, horny red-haired girl? Everything was going wrong. Patty was the kind of woman who couldn't keep her panties in place if there was a man in the room. I should have seen this coming. The first time I saw her, she was working as a waitress in a tiny cafe. One look at her, and I was lost. I watched her for a few weeks, worked up the courage to ask her out, and to my surprise, she looked me up and down, then nodded. We went to the movies, yes, I know, a high-end date, but that was my plan. At that time I was far from rich, but I was thrifty and lived conservatively. I had a house with 10 acres of land that I was paying off a mortgage on, and some good stock market investments brought my savings to just over $30,000. I worked on a forklift, loading pallets of goods into huge trucks. It was a job I didn't particularly like, but it was union and the pay was good. Maybe Patty saw me as a guy who had something. Maybe. I never found out, but I asked her and she said yes. We only drove a few blocks and had sex on her initiative, and we never made it to the cinema. I should have realized what was going on then. It took a long time to realize that Patty wanted to have sex with every man she came across. She had some strange obsession with sex, and even in her younger years, she knew very well what to do with it. Yes, even better than any woman I've dated before or since, to be honest. What she could do, where she learned it, I don't know. And I never found out. Until that moment, I had never met a woman like her. I sat and watched her work, eating her eggs and potatoes, while one by one young guys came in and flirted with her. She responded in kind, showing interest in each of them, even to much older men, to everyone. I naively thought that this was just part of her job. Patty also dated many of these guys and had a seemingly endless stream of admirers, but she didn't act like she was serious about getting into a relationship with any of them, because I saw some of them come back, trying to get another chance, but to no avail. This first time is forever etched in my memory. We were standing right in front of everyone, on the side of the road, but there was nothing I could do about it. Cars drove by, one of them honked loudly, but I didn't care. I just wanted to continue with her. Let's go to your place. I want to do it in bed, the way it should be. My little 1966 Nova was a little hot rod, and I think I broke a few records getting to my 10-acre farm. When we got inside, she wanted to listen to music and started digging through my stack of records. As soon as the music started, she gave me a dance, laughing and teasing. Somehow we became a couple, or so it seemed to me. She loved it when I told her how she lay on the ocean shore and how the waves slowly covered her outstretched legs as she lay with her eyes closed. This should have been a warning to me, especially since she owned at least 3 dozen pairs of shoes and was constantly buying more. It suddenly dawned on me that maybe she was teasing guys in shoe stores while I was at work, but she denied everything. Then there was a time when I came home from work, and 2 salesmen were sitting in the living room. They were lounging on the couch across from Patty, but as soon as I entered the house, they jumped up. There was something dirty about their appearance. They were clearly excited, just like Patty herself. She was wearing a low-cut top, and most of her perky breasts were visible, and she was wearing short denim shorts that barely covered her buttocks. At first glance, I understood what she was doing. God knows how long Patty sat there while two guys tried to sell her one of the cars. They were damn unhappy that I walked through the door. What the hell were you doing? I demanded as soon as I got them out the door. Nothing. I was just interested in the car, that's all. This was almost our very first quarrel, but then she climbed into my lap, and I forgot about it. Sex. Have I ever had sex? There seemed to be no end to this. The day after our first date, when I took her home, I learned that she lived with her mother and little sister, Mary Ann, just 4 miles down the road in a trailer home. It was a surprise to me that she lived so close. The younger sister was very short, only a year shorter. I knew that she had a brother a year older, but I met him much later. I met her mother, Carla. This woman looked, acted, and sounded like a cowgirl, right down to the daisy shorts she often wore around the house. She looked quite young and in pretty good shape, considering she had 5 children, as I also found out later. None of them looked alike either. Then Patty told me that her mother was only a few years older than me. Yes, I did the math in my head, but it's none of my business. When I asked Patty out again the day after our first date, if that's what it was, I half expected rejection, as I'd seen before with other guys. She surprised me and agreed. 2 weeks later, she asked me if she could move in with me. She hated living with her mother and the string of sleepovers with men in skinny jeans and cowboy hats, while her stepfather was away for days at a time driving his truck. He had only been home a few days and acted as if he didn't care that his wife was messing around. Hell, he must have known, because one night I was there, he was sitting in his chair when Carla answered the phone. "Jerry's home, so maybe later, okay?" she told whoever was on the other end of the line. Her mother was still very attractive, but she was a woman of easy virtue. She didn't try to hide anything she was doing at all. One day I came to pick up Patty. She wasn't quite ready. I was sitting on the couch, and a slender guy came out of the back bedroom into the bathroom, which was down the hall. He was naked. He just nodded at me like it was normal. Then Patty walked out of the bedroom just as the guy came back. They had to turn sideways to pass unhindered. Patty walked past him with a smile on her face. He said something to her that I didn't hear. Patty just giggled. The dude went back into the back bedroom and closed the door. Then Patty looked up and, seeing the look on my face, simply shrugged. Several times her mother walked past me without a shirt, and once without any clothes at all. "Damn it, Mom, Danny's sitting right there." Patty yelled at her for this, but Carla just shrugged. She didn't seem upset at all about her mom's naked boyfriend, but she didn't like her mom being naked in front of me. Early one evening, I was sitting on their couch waiting for Patty to get dressed. Her mom came and sat next to me. She was wearing a skimpy halter top and regular shorts. "You seem to like my little girl. You're not going to hurt her, are you?" she asked, patting my thigh. "No, of course not. She's really special," I answered. "Fine. I like you." I just looked at her. "Big boy, I see. No wonder Patty likes you. Maybe one of these days I'll try it myself." She grinned and stood up, leaving me sitting there in amazement. After that, I looked after Patty's mother, but she didn't do anything else. She probably would have tried something, but Patty came to live with me. But all of this was enough that I really should have known. Patty and I had been living together for about 2 months when the first breakup happened, and she ended up with a friend, as she called him. Somehow we got back together. I was upset that she was with another guy, but she stated that since we were separated, I had no right to say anything about it. She also stated that they are just friends. I noticed the guy was wearing a cowboy hat and skinny jeans. I was angry to say the least, but if you had seen Patty naked, you would have understood. I tried it, really. But the arguments continued every few weeks, and one day she left again, this time with another guy. It became a kind of cycle. Patty would deliberately start a fight, bring me to a boil, and then leave. But as soon as I was ready to give up on everything, she returned. I accused her of cheating with other men, but she always denied it, except once when she said that since we weren't together, it didn't matter. Then she moved to a small apartment. Of course, after our next quarrel. But like a fool, I continued to come to her. I really tried. But in reality, I completely lost control, as if she could force me to do anything or endure anything. I could see her, have sex with her, but it was all on her terms, not mine. One afternoon I was with her. It was one of the rare quiet times. Patty decided to take a hot shower, like she usually did before sex, and I thought that was where it was going. While she was in the shower, I went to her bedroom, opened the drawer, and of course, there was a box of protective equipment. It was open and several pieces were missing. Patty and I didn't use them because she was on the pill. Well, that's all. I understood what was happening. To hell with it, I decided it's time to move on. I left the apartment, got into the car, and drove away while she was still in the shower. 3 whole days passed during which I did not call her even once. I would just go to work, come home, and be mad at myself. I was up to my neck in her shit, I told myself. And then came that tearful phone call in which she admitted her mistake, asked if I still loved her, and suggested we go to Reno and get married. I hesitated. This time I really hesitated. I wasn't sure this was a good idea anymore. If we do this, Patty, it has to be just you and me forever. Marriage is a commitment. It means something, I said. I know I love only you. Now I understand it. No one makes me feel the way I feel with you. She seemed to be crying. Yes, I know. Don't tell me. It still pisses me off. Stupid than a box of rocks. It only took her 4 months. All that time she was an absolute sweetheart, as far as I knew, and I took the bait like a fool, like a fat perch on a bait. Sex, crazy sex. Every evening, sometimes she woke me up in the middle of the night. I was so crazy about this woman that I was ready to do anything just to be with her. Hell, I even got a couple of speeding tickets on the way home from work. I wanted to be near her so bad. Life was perfect. And then she left. You really are a stupid son of a bitch, aren't you? Stanley Harmon told me as he looked through the documents. Stanley was my lawyer. I knew him for many years. He never softened his words and told it like it was. What about those fines? Just pay the damn fines, he told me. What could I say? He was right. I really was a stupid son of a bitch. The car that I bought and restored for her with my own hands, money, furniture, everything disappeared. Patty played with me as she wanted until she had everything just the way she wanted it, and then she ran away with enough money to support herself for the next few years. My $32K in savings, every penny was gone. Checking account? Empty. It's across state lines. We can try to do something, but it will complicate everything. And besides, damn it, you added her name to all the bills. Stanley shook his head. I was furious and managed to find her in Lewiston. When I showed up there in the morning, she came out with her fat brother and 2 men. One thing led to another, and basically, I just got beat up. Too much beer, too much sedentary lifestyle. Hell, I was already over 30, and that's how many extra pounds I was carrying around on my belly. You shouldn't have done that, Stanley told me, shaking his head. Yes, I know. Stay away from her until I get the situation under control, and go to this guy, learn to defend yourself. He handed me a business card. I looked at her and laughed. Well, of course, just what I need, learn karate. At that moment, I was more inclined to buy myself a Colt .45. But I called him and made an appointment. When he opened the door, he looked at me with contempt. Damn, he was just a skinny brat. That's what I told him. Yeah, I opened my mouth and said he didn't look that tough. I've never been able to keep my mouth shut. The cigarette was stuck in my teeth, a movement flashed in front of me, and the cigarette was knocked out of my mouth. This made me angry, and I reached out to him. The next moment, I was sitting on the ground, unable to breathe. Dude, you're a total slob, aren't you? Said the little bastard, leaning over me. He then chuckled and helped me up. So I ended up in a situation where I was knocked down over and over again every night. But after 3 months, the belly disappeared. I quit smoking too. Somehow it turned into an obsession. Money, all the stuff that little bitch ran off with. Stanley said it was a pretty cheap lesson, something about shared ownership. And if I agree to leave everything as it is, I can keep the house. We can fight it and probably win at least half. But it will cost you about the same amount, he told me. I signed the damn papers. And don't even think about going to her, Stanley ordered. He noticed the expression on my face. If you think about what to do, you will lose, Tim repeated over and over again. I gradually became more and more difficult for him to target. It's funny, but it didn't bother me that they beat me. I always thought I'd be scared because I've never had a real fight except with 3 guys in Lewiston. But it wasn't a fight, not a real one. It was just beating me up. When Tim hit me, I started to feel dizzy, but at some point I stopped being afraid. I loved this feeling. It's hard to explain. Everything changed one day when he tried to hit me in the face, but he hit me in the arm. He then tried to do a simple leg grab, but missed, and I hit him. We smiled at each other. We then stood on the mat for a good 10 minutes trading blows until several other kids in the class stopped to watch us. Slap, slap, slap. These were the only sounds in the hall. There was nothing soft in these blows. I tried to hit him in the chest, and he did the same. When he hit me in the chest, I blocked it and hit back. We were both now caught off guard and could only use our hands. Right, left, faster and faster until everything became a blur. It's really just speed training where you stand toe-to-toe with your opponent, gradually increase the pace until someone starts to fall behind and the punches start landing, forcing the loser to back off the mat. Until that day, I had always been the one to retreat when the blows came too fast for me to block them. But this time Tim was the first to take a step back off the mat. He just smiled at me and then asked me to join his team. They had a match planned with another club, a full-on fight. I sat and watched such fights several times, and no one was joking there. They said that the fight was judged on points, but in reality the task was simply to knock out the opponent. Our team performed well, but definitely not thanks to me. They put me up against another guy, about 200 pounds, black, about 20 years old. He won on points, but I still stood on my feet at the end of the fight. He came up to me afterwards, hugged me, and said I was a pretty tough old bastard. Why did I make such sacrifices? Why did you spend a whole fucking year learning to fight and getting in shape? That guy at my ex-wife's house that day was her red-haired brother. Not only did he and the rest of the freaks kick my ass, but this brother spat in my face. In the background, I heard Patty laughing. There are things a man simply cannot forget. It was sitting in my head like a damn tumor or something. Money? To hell with it. It's just money. I could earn more. But he spat on me, and I had no way to stop him or do anything about it. I swore to myself that nothing like this would happen to me again. I didn't go on dates. I didn't go out at all. I used to often hang out in bars, drink, smoke, and have fun. Now all this was gone. I was just training. This became a real crazy obsession for me. Every night after work, I would go home, take a shower, and go to the gym. After a couple of months, Tim gave me a key so I could go there on Sundays as well. No women, I didn't like them at all. Although this is not entirely true, there was this girl named Lee who, for $50, allowed me to do almost anything I wanted. She had long dark hair and a good figure. She fit perfectly into the studio. It was obvious that she liked big, strong men, and this was an easy way for her to pay the bills. She said that she took $100 from the others, but she loved me more than anyone. At least that's what she told me. I thought she said this to everyone. I noticed that she was often nearby, and when one of the guys approached her and whispered something, she would give me a side glance before leaving with them. Later, she came back to the gym and watched me work out, looking exactly the same as before. I noticed that not once during the entire evening did she leave with anyone else. Sometimes she didn't leave with anyone at all. She just shook her head negatively when one of the guys approached her again. One day, I asked her when she returned from being with a client, but she shook her head and looked upset. I just shrugged, finding it strange. Lee was really pretty, had a toned body, and she kept herself in shape. Tim let her use the equipment for free essentially. Lee was just making a living, and having an available girl in the studio was good for business. Apart from her, there was only me and my anger in my life. I was happy with being hit in the face, in the stomach, in the arms, kicked in the head. This motivated me even more. After that, I hit even harder. So many guys refused to spar with me. I wanted to go up there and beat up Patty's brother and her new boyfriend, and maybe, if I was lucky, find those two creeps, and then wrap my fingers around Patty's neck and squeeze it. Is it true? I didn't even admit it to myself, but I still loved that damn bitch. I wanted her, and at the same time I wanted to strangle her. Madness? Of course it's crazy. No one in the world will understand this feeling until they experience it themselves. We read in the papers how some idiot finally gives in, takes a gun, shoots his ex-woman, and then kills himself. This could have been me a couple of years ago. But I didn't. Instead, I somehow ended up working for Tim as one of the instructors. The salary became less, but I didn't care. I hated driving that damn forklift every day, damn it, even if it was a good union job. And then the fights started to be fun, and I suddenly won several in a row. I even had a rematch with that tall black guy, and I won. He was good, hit me a few times, and still stood at the end of the fight. Tim and I often had practice matches on the mat, but he could no longer resist me. I became heavier, stronger, and just as fast as him. Those looks of contempt that I received from bodybuilders in the beginning have stopped. I became one of them. I remember the day when I looked at myself in the mirror and realized that I did not recognize the person who was looking at me from there. My body became long and muscular, but not pumped up like serious bodybuilders. I became a fighter. My head was shaved bald, the short stubble gave me an even more brutal appearance, and my facial features were roughened by constant blows. Damn, I looked downright angry, even to myself. One more thing I can say for sure. Intense training is good for the love muscle. Once or twice a week, I would look at Lee and smile. She already knew by then and answered me with a smile. It was almost as if she was waiting for me to invite her. These meetings with her were amazing. Sex with Lee was almost as good as sex with Patty, and I sometimes found myself comparing the two in my mind. We went out to eat together a couple of times. It almost felt like a date, but it wasn't really. She said that she enjoyed being with me because I always made sure that she had fun too. Patty taught me some tricks in love, and I used them as intended. But sex with a woman of easy virtue is not love, not real love. However, for some reason, it still felt that way to me. I started staying at her place overnight instead of leaving right after, and she didn't seem to mind. Many times we made love again in the morning. Those were fun moments. But she still always took her $50 and in advance. This puzzled me somewhat. Could she really live on what she earned? So I asked her directly one day. I work in a clothing store during the day. It doesn't make enough money, but I like it. But this, with men, is just a part-time job. I wouldn't be doing this at all if... Here she fell silent and blushed. Clothing store. This was the last thing I expected to hear. One day the phone rang in the studio. I picked up the phone, expecting it to be a client. Tim was busy with several plump ladies. They were often brought to us for evening classes. They were apparently afraid that some guy would try to grab them, although that was unlikely, looking at some of them. But still, it brought in income. The caller offered me participation in the fight. It turns out that they were planning an event in the city center cage fighting. I'd seen it on TV, but never even thought about it. Except when they raised the winner's hand, I thought I could kick his ass. I had no plans to participate in this, but one of the fighters pulled out at the last minute, and they needed someone to take his place. I was ready to refuse, but then he said that they would pay me $2,000 for participation. Win or lose doesn't matter, he added. $2,000, that's half a dozen house payments. I dealt with them, but everything was quite tense. So I ended up where I was introduced under the name Hammerfist Hansen. God knows where they got that name from, but I didn't care. $2,000. I somehow ended up with 6 wins and no losses, while the tattooed beast, eyes flashing from the other side of the ring, had 13 wins and 2 losses. He looked pretty angry too. 2 seconds later, I was on my back, and the bastard was beating me. I've seen this on TV, but never practiced it. 5 long minutes of this crap, and the round is over. Now I was furious. "Don't let the bastard get on top of you," Tim shouted from outside the ring. That's exactly what he did. Maybe I escaped on my own, or maybe they lifted us up. Still not sure. I was going to jump on him and retaliate, but I realized that there was no need. There was noise and screams, then they raised my hand. "We could use you," said the man, raising my hand. At least that's what I thought he said. I was limping, but I had $2,000 in my pocket, although my leg hurt like hell. Training and fighting, training and fighting. One animal after another. One day I was watching a rerun on cable television and almost didn't recognize myself. My competitors quickly realized that I could win. I lost one fight this way. If you can't breathe, you can't fight, it's that simple. This guy got on my list, and after 6 months I dealt with him. He made the mistake of lowering his head, just like the first time. In fighting circles, the name Hammerfist Hansen became famous. I had 13 wins and 2 losses, and I was now getting paid $5,000 per fight. All the fights were on the preliminary cards. I wanted to go to the main event because they paid much more, but they kept telling me that I was not ready yet. However, I already had $20,000 in my account, and things were going well. By the age of 35, I was already a little old for the profession I accidentally fell into. But now our gym is quite famous. I became Tim's full partner, and we made decent money. We expanded our activities. We now had a large gym, a sauna, fitness classes, still full of pretty housewives, a massage parlor, which Tim especially loved. Tim seemed to love messing with chubby ladies and did it quite often. It's funny, but Lee, my slender prostitute girlfriend, was often around, and Time was not at all interested in her. Too thin, probably. I had nothing to do with the clients, except that sometimes one of them complained of pain, and I needed their shoulders. At first I did it in the back room, but there was one incident with a woman named Marie. She was probably about 40, weighed about 80 kilograms, but was quite pretty. I grabbed a bottle of lotion and followed her into the room. She sat down on the edge of the bench and threw off her gym top just like that. She looked offended when I refused. As a result, we lost her as a client. After that, I began to warm up clients only in the main hall. Everything that happened in the back room was left to Tim, who seemed not to be bothered at all. The only person I went to bed with was Lee, my slender prostitute. Several times I even took her with me to fights that took place outside the city, and for some reason she was always ready to do anything after the fight. We never did anything before the fight. I needed all the energy. But after the fight, Lee took care of me. She never asked for money for these trips. By that time, I had already become well known in fighting circles and was still hoping for a championship fight. My problem was that I weighed about 215 pounds, and most of the guys in the unlimited weight class were real giants, and I had to work really hard to get down to 205. I worked like a dog to make the cut. It didn't help that I could eat 3 of these healthy whoppers in one sitting. Sometimes I would reward myself with a bucket of 10 pieces of fried chicken. This was one of my little weaknesses. I felt guilty and then trained hard for the next week. One afternoon, I was working in our studio with a couple of ladies, showing them how they could take down a 200-pound attacker with a couple of simple techniques. Of course, they could, but the very confidence that they were capable of this already helped. This gave them more confidence, and confident behavior often repelled potential aggressors as much as any action. I looked up and saw an attractive woman enter the hall. It took me a few seconds to recognize her. Mother Patty. What was her name? Finally, I remembered Carl. She came right up to me and smiled. "Hi, Danny," she said. I nodded, looking her up and down. The skirt is too short, the top is too revealing and loose, There is too much makeup. How can I help you, Carla? I asked. Oh, I was thinking about joining your club, taking a few lessons, working on myself. Okay, I'll ask Tim. I started. No, I want you. She smiled a wide smile. I was amazed that her words could be understood ambiguously. That evening, I learned that she meant it both ways. It might be stupid, but having sex with Patty's mom felt damn good. It seemed that in this way I was striking a blow at Patty herself. What is Patty doing now? I asked after. Carla was sitting on the bed. She returned to the city, lives with me. Carla smiled. That's it, I said, trying not to show what just flashed through my head. Maybe it's better if we don't mention it, Carla laughed. I could have bet the money and won, because the next day Patty walked into the studio. She looked around for a few seconds, then noticed me. Danny, I saw you on TV. You've become so healthy, she said, approaching me as if we were old friends. I didn't actually get any bigger, but my figure did change. The muscles were now in the right places. The last time I heard her voice, she was laughing about how her fat brother spat in my face years ago. This image immediately popped into my head. The training is doing its job, I said, keeping a calm expression on my face. I just wanted to see you. It's been so long. I couldn't even imagine that you would do what you are doing now. She smiled. I looked at her from head to toe. The same loose blouse, the same short skirt. But she looked a little fuller than I remembered. However, she still enjoyed my attention as much as always. Shall we go have some coffee? She suggested. Why not? I called one of the staff to replace me in class, earning a couple of displeased looks from the women. I glanced to the side and saw Lee talking to one of the men, but her eyes were fixed on me and Patty. I noticed a flash of anger on her face as we left. I didn't quite understand this. I told her things, but she never met Patty. I can't believe how much you've changed, Danny. You have become so healthy, Patty said, sipping her coffee. I had a glass of fruit juice. I didn't drink coffee before the fights, and there was only a week left until the next match. So why are you here? I asked. I just wanted to see you. And now that I'm living in the city again, I thought we could meet and catch up. Are you not married? I asked. No, not now. There was, but nothing came of it. Like you and me, right? I said. Sorry about that, Danny. I was too young, but now I'm all grown up. You are the best man I have ever known. She reached out and stroked my hand, then began to rub it, just like her mother had done the day before. Do you want to see where I live? I asked. Stupid question. I was still living on my 10 acres in the country. It was impulsive, but to hell with it. Suddenly, I wanted to have sex with her. With pleasure, she answered with a smile. Just like the first time, we didn't even travel 2 miles. Yes, I know. Back to regular sex with Patty again. This distracted me, and I missed the weight, and not by a little. My weight was 217 pounds. It was a regional fight. They announced that I weighed 205, but everyone probably knew the truth, and there was a mixed reaction in the form of dissatisfied exclamations when my hand was raised at the end of the second round. This was supposed to be one of my 60-second fights, but I felt sluggish, heavy. None of my tricks worked. Those blows that I could strike in the air turned out to be untimely, out of time. The signature moves that fans loved me for just didn't work. Finally, I hit my opponent with a right hook, and he collapsed as if he had been knocked down. I'm not used to this outcome. Regular meetings with Lee also ended. I still saw her almost every day. She always smiled and greeted me, but she never mentioned the changes that had happened. Several times I noticed how one of the other guys would approach her, say something, Lee would nod, and soon they would leave together. I also noticed myself lying in bed with Patty, but I thought about what Lee was like when she was with me on those trips. She always seemed so happy then. But none of this really touched or affected me. Patty quickly realized the situation with Lee, after which she began to ignore her, as if she was beneath her dignity. And then Patty asked if I'd ever had an affair with that woman of easy virtue who hangs out at the gym. I confessed, and it caused an argument. It all ended with me telling her that it doesn't make much difference whether you have sex for money or do it for free, which made her terribly angry, and she left. She understood perfectly well that this was a jab at her. But she returned later that day, acting as if nothing had happened. 2 months later, I was put in a heavyweight match. There was no way out because my weight had gone up to 240 pounds. Patty loved to dine out and go to fancy places, and we did it almost every night. I worked hard and skipped lunches, but still lost ground. The water could be removed later, but the fat could not. My chance at the 205 pounds match was gone. "Dude, you need to stay away from the damn Cheetos," Tim once told me rudely in the studio. He was clearly annoyed. I didn't answer. "This woman is no good for you," he added, which infuriated me. "Mind your own business," I barked. We almost got into a fight, but he turned around and left. During this period, I don't know exactly what happened, but Patty reappeared and we ended up together again. And for some reason my anger at her disappeared. She showed no signs of her old behavior, except that she still dressed in a way that always attracted attention. One day her brother came to see her on some business, and I was there. He looked at me with uncertainty, not at all the same as when he looked at me with contempt all those years ago. But I smiled and shook his hand. I saw the pain in his eyes as I squeezed his hand and didn't let go longer than necessary. Then I sat down and watched him closely while he talked to Patty about some house they were selling together. He glanced at me more and more often, becoming more and more nervous, while I just looked at him silently. "What?" he finally asked. "I just remembered the day you spat on me," I said. "Danny, don't be like that," Patty intervened, realizing what was about to happen. "Sorry, I didn't mean anything like that," I said with a smile and extended my hand. Her fat brother stupidly took it, and I squeezed his hand even tighter, pulled him towards me, and spat in his face. "You want to do something about this, asshole?" I growled with a smile, continuing to hold his hand, although he tried to break free. I squeezed her even tighter. There was fear in his eyes, and suddenly I realized that I no longer felt anything for him. I let him go. It was all over. It was similar to the feeling when you hit your opponent exactly. The fight is over, and you are no longer interested in the outcome. Her brother quickly left and Patty attacked me. We had a quarrel again, and she shouted that she was going to her mother. "Well, move out, I don't care," I said and sat down in my chair. All the events of the past came flooding back to me. "You were a scoundrel then, and you still are now," she shouted, packing her things into her suitcase. She might have been quieter if she knew what I was thinking. The old fantasy of me squeezing her neck with my hands resurfaced in my mind. "You just want to go and sleep with another guy," I barked, but remained sitting because I knew if I get up. She didn't answer. "But your mother is as good a woman as you are," I added in rage. "What?" She stared at me. "You heard me." Patty stormed out of the apartment, and I was pretty sure that was it. Tim was right. She was ruining my life. Again. 244 pounds, Hammerfist Hansen. The announcer announced. Rare applause rang out in the hall. I looked to the side and saw Lee sitting in the front row. I smiled at her and waved. She waved back. Then another guy was announced, Killer Kowalski. He weighed 296 pounds, but he looked like he was 400. To be honest, even I could not have come up with such a name. He was a huge Pole. I heard about him. He had 12 victories and not a single defeat. Not a single fight lasted longer than the first round. This guy just rushed in and crushed everyone who stood in his way. I was annoyed that he was getting all the attention. He was already tipped for the next championship fight. I knew that I was put here simply as another step on his way up. But let's see how it turns out, I thought. We circled each other for 3 minutes, trading blows, getting closer and closer. I managed to land a straight punch on him, a hard right hand that would normally have dropped anyone, but it had no effect on him. Then he rushed forward, just as I expected. I put everything I had into this blow. Nothing. He didn't even blink. He grabbed me and lifted me like a sack of flour. It was like an elephant was sitting on me. I tried everything I knew to break free, but nothing worked. I hit him as hard as I could. That's the last thing I remember. When I woke up, there were lamps shining in front of my eyes, and several men were saying something. My only thought was to get up before I was counted out. Then I realized that I was not in the ring. Damn, what happened? I asked. You lost 4 minutes into the first round, someone told me. My head hurt like hell. I sat up with difficulty. What did this fat idiot expect when he arrived in such a state? Someone muttered on the way out. I got up. Tim sat and looked at me. Hey, tough fight, Dan, he said. Yeah, I got up and went to the shower. I sat there underwater for a long time. When I came out, there was only one guy left in the locker room who was apparently there to keep an eye on me. But there sat Lee, her hands resting on her knees. Hey, buddy, I told her to leave, but she didn't listen. The guy said. It's okay, I replied. He just shrugged. Hello, Dan. I'm sorry you lost, but I thought maybe... She began. At that moment, nothing in the world could have given me greater pleasure. We went to my hotel room. One could say that we indulged in passionate love, but that was not the case. Instead, she applied ointment to me, stroked me, comforted me, and for some reason it felt good on some inexplicable level. Then we went to bed and Lee slept all night cuddled up to me. Lee was someone you could just be around, someone you could share your troubles with. The next morning I woke up and saw her sitting in a chair, wearing a beautiful beige blouse and trousers. I have a flight home in a few hours, she said. Tim and I are driving. Why don't you come with us? I suggested. Is it true? I think I would like it, she smiled. Great. We have a few hours. Come here, I said with a smile. The only part of my body that didn't hurt was in full alert, and Lee and I took good advantage of it. Then they fell asleep again. Plus. I woke up to Lee clinging tightly to me. I know you had, or have, a relationship with that woman, but I really missed it, she said, smiling. Me too, I answered, and suddenly realized that it was true. The long drive home was peaceful. Lee mostly listened while Tim and I discussed how I could get back into shape. I couldn't understand how I gained almost 250 pounds so quickly. There were a number of factors, one of which was Patty's bad influence. We even discussed it, and I told Tim everything that I had been keeping inside for a long time. He listened and said that if I wanted to get back to my previous form, he would help. When we arrived home, Lee was still with me. She asked to come with me because I was in such a beaten state. In the evening, she went into the kitchen, rummaged through the cabinets, and found something from which she prepared dinner. I didn't know you could cook, I said as I started eating. There are a lot of things you don't know about me, she smiled. Job. I was working. I lost 20 pounds in the first month and another 15 in the second. I was now in the 210-215 pound range, and I could have gotten in a fight or two if I put in more effort, but for some reason didn't want this. Tim, Lee, and I sat and watched the television broadcast of Killer Kowalski becoming the new champion, defeating the defending champion in just 3 minutes of the first round. I closely followed the fight and could not believe that I had once stood in the same ring with such a person. This guy was huge, fast, and ruthless. Tim laughed when I mentioned this. I understand why you don't want to fight anymore, he said. But you have this wonderful girl, he added with a smile, looking at Lee, who was embarrassed. I looked at Tim, then at Lee. It dawned on me. Over the past 2 months, she's been hanging around a lot like usual, but I haven't seen her go out with anyone else. Besides, she didn't ask me for money, and I noticed that. Instead of going to our apartment, we went to my house where she spent the night. The few times she wasn't with me, my house felt cold. With everything else in my life that was a mess, I started to think of Lee as a friend. It must have shown on my face because I looked at Tim with confusion. Damn, you're slow. He laughed again, got up and left. I want to talk, I told Lee that evening at home. Okay, she came and sat down. What are we doing here? I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm, grateful to you for, I began awkwardly. A woman of easy virtue. Available. It's okay, I understand. I know who I am. She turned away, but I managed to notice how tears flashed in her eyes. Hey, listen. I don't think badly of you. I like being with you and I like having you around. That's probably the point, right? You're not. I noticed that you're not. I hesitated. Not doing work? No, I quit. I live on my savings. I think I'll have to find a normal job soon. Understood. But you're here with me. Do you want to be with me? I guess. I just want to take care of you, Danny. I can take care of myself. Yes, I'm sure you can. She looked me straight in the eyes. After I dropped her off at her apartment that evening, I almost turned back on the way home. Almost. Sorry you lost, were Patty's first words when I picked up the phone the next morning. What do you want? I asked. I had no idea why she was calling me. I just wanted to ask how you are. It was terrible, she began, and then went on a long tirade about how good she was. She even said that she forgives me for the incident with her mother. Mom is who she is, it's not your fault, she added. God forgive me, but I started to relax and talk to her. Finally, I said that I needed to go to the gym, and she mentioned that she would stop by and watch me work out. No more than half an hour had passed since Patty entered the gym. She looked defiant, as always, and acted as if she owned everything here. She noticed me and walked straight towards me. Damn it! Are you going to put up with this again? Tim said, turned around and left, clearly unhappy. Patty and I talked for a bit, and then I went back to the mat. One of the heavyweights starting his career worked with me. He started from the top, and I practiced release techniques. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Lee enter the hall. She almost came to me, but then she saw Patty sitting nearby. I saw her face darken with displeasure, and she turned to leave. I shrugged my shoulders, broke free of my partner's grip, and stood up. Lee, I called, heading towards her. She stopped and turned around. I barely had time to approach her when Patty was immediately next to me. What are you doing? She demanded. I need to talk to Lee, I replied. For what? What do you want to talk about with this damn woman of easy virtue? Patty growled. Listen, honey, watch your words. Lee answered sharply, her face becoming gloomy. Yes, so what will you do? Danny and I are trying to make things work. We don't need someone like you to get into this. I may be a woman of easy virtue, but at least I choose who to be with and not sleep with everyone I meet, Lee retorted. Patty reached out to her. She was at least 30 pounds overweight compared to Lee's slight frame. Lee beat her in a fight. The whole fight came out of Patty. It was all over in 30 seconds. Lee stood up and looked down at Patty. I told you about the insults, she said and stepped back, looking at me. At that moment, I realized that I was proud of her. Patty stood up, took a few more moments to regain her composure, and then ran out the door. At that moment, I realized that I didn't care. Where did you learn this? I asked Lee. I've been watching you here in the hall for a long time, she answered with a smile. Let's go, I said. The whole hall stopped and watched. Okay, she answered quietly. Lee nearly dropped her coffee cup when I asked her if she wanted to move in with me permanently. Oh, Danny. That was the first time I remembered her calling me Danny. I don't know. You know who I was, right? I don't care. I want you to be with me, to be mine. Only mine, without any others forever. I blurted out. Some guys in the club. I was with them, she asked. I understood what she meant. She also glowed with happiness. None of them will ever say a word. I was sure of it. I'm Hammerfist Hansen after all. I may have had problems with that gorilla named Kowalski, but I was confident that I could handle any of the others. Well, so it seemed to me. A couple of hours later at the gym, Tim was just leaving the massage room, followed by a smiling woman who weighed about 180 pounds. She looked a little flushed. I just grinned. Tim looked in our direction and saw us. We held hands. A few guys looked too, but immediately went back to training. I reached out and pulled Lee even closer. Wow, finally. Now let's work on getting rid of your fat belly. He grinned at me. Maybe I can help with this. Lee laughed. We all laughed, and I got to work. What about the big championship fight? Who knows? Maybe I'll get it, maybe I won't. It's not that important anymore. I already had what really mattered. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.